everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Headstrong podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Mills. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to this phenomenal woman that we have on today. She is a professional agency signed model. She's worked with the likes of Ritz Carlton, Chase Bank, Ashley Furniture, DevaCurl, and so many more companies. And in addition to that, she's also a modeling coach who just released her first book, which we are so excited to learn more about. But welcome to the show, Kamla-Kay.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here with you. This is such an honor to be on your podcast and to just dive in. I'm sure you have some amazing questions. So just looking forward to this hour together.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So you have to tell us, how did this all begin? How did you get into modeling? Kind of walk us through what that looked like and how you kind of got to today.
Gotcha. Okay, so let me try to do the quick version. So when I was a child, I was pretty much obsessed with Tyra Banks. I've gotten better, but I used to just be obsessed. And so I just knew, or at least I thought as I got older, that I would eventually become a model. But, as time went on, I did the responsible thing, right? Or quote unquote, the responsible thing. I went off to college, I got my bachelor's degree, I got my master's degree, I worked full time. And then I thought, I really want to pursue this before time just slips away from me. And so I actually resigned from my full-time job, moved to Miami, which was a couple hours away from where I was working, or moved back to Miami, I should say rather. And then just essentially started submitting myself to agencies, and the rest is history from that point of being a child and having this aspiration like Tyra Banks, and then now full circle, here I am with everything that I'm doing with my TV commercials and my print work and my model coaching and everything in that realm.
Did you always know that you wanted to be a model? Is this something that you knew from a young age, or was for people always oh my gosh, you should model? I know you were obsessed with Tyra Banks. I totally still am too, but I'm just kind of curious, where did it, you were really young?
I think, so about elementary school, I would say, I remember, even my parents had actually tried to get me into it, but not really knowing anything about the industry. They ended up taking photos, and it was just a process that was just very cumbersome, and not knowing, we got taken advantage of by the agency and photographer. And so it just never really went anywhere, but ever since I was a child, I would say, but that dream kind of fizzled out because I just didn't think it's one of those things that you aspire to be, but you never really think per se that it's realistic or that it could happen for you. And then when I was in college, I started this modeling group on campus. Ooh. And from there we would do fashion shows and things of that nature in the community and on campus. And so I just knew that it was always just part of me.
No, definitely. And then talk about how you got into being a modeling coach, because that's a big transition, because you still are an active working model today, but you have your coaching business too. And I find it so interesting. So kind of walk us through how that all came to be and what made you say, I want to coach people on how to do this.
Yeah. So, honestly, it wasn't something that I necessarily thought I was going to get into. So in my brain at the time, there were multiple things happening. People would say to me, okay, you should write a book, or you should start a YouTube. And especially when it came to the book, for instance, I thought, okay, well, I don't have enough words to write a book. I don't know as much as people think that I know, right? But then I would just get all of these inbox messages from people asking me questions about the industry. And I realized that every question they asked me, I actually did know the answer to those questions. And I was able to expound upon that for them to just help them on their path. And so just from realizing how many people were constantly reaching out to me, people would say, they would just use the line, oh, modeling coach XYZ. They would automatically say that I was their modeling coach just because I was responding, just because I was putting out content on my Instagram with all of these free tips. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I actually signed up for a business course on how to create or how to become a coach from a professional standpoint. And then just through that coursing nature, I was able to realize, okay, this is something that I could truly do. I do have more knowledge than I'm giving myself credit for. And so, I just created this program and started putting it out there. And, people were really receptive to the idea of getting direct answers, and especially answers tailored to them.
No, definitely. Because I know me back in the day, I want to say I was 18 or 19 when I was considering the idea of modeling. I felt so lost and didn't really know where to go, what to do. I just kind of went with the flow. And I wish I would have had at that time somebody who I could have reached out to that was legit, who was real, because there's so many scams and there's just so many companies out there that are like, oh, pay all this money and we guarantee you this. And it's like, there's so many scams out there. So I think it's so awesome that you are so reputable and you can truly speak from experience, you know, with the people you work with. So to kind of piggyback off of that, who are your like ideal clients? Like, what are you looking for? And kind of walk us through what that kind of looks like.
So I think to just backtrack a second, I mean, I've worked with, like you mentioned, you know, clients like the Ritz Carlton. I've even worked with the Kardashians before. Khloe, by the way, was super sweet. Let me interject that when I met her. You know, I've done, I lost count, probably over 50 TV commercials, countless print jobs. So there's always that element of, okay, I've accomplished so much. I've worked with so many clients, but then I see myself and I think this is only the tip of the iceberg for what I know I'm capable of doing, right? And so one of my big things is Sephora. I would love to do an amazing beauty campaign. And I don't know if your audience can see, but I actually have green eyes. So I just feel like this would be perfect for a beauty campaign when they're doing eyeshadow and all those things. It would stand out for a beauty brand. But so, you know, when I go to stores, obviously not so much right now with everything happening in climate, but when I would typically go to the mall and walk by stores like Sephora, I would literally visualize, and I still do this now even at home, I visualize myself like on the walls of Sephora. I've worked with Ulta, or I've worked, you know, with curly hair brands before. So I've been inside of stores like Sephora and Ulta, but for other brands. But I specifically want to work with brands like, you know, Sephora and Smashbox and CoverGirl and, you know, all of the likes of those companies, Pantene for my curly hair. So there's a list.
I love the fact that you mentioned that this is something that you manifest, and as you go around different stores, especially Sephora, you envision yourself doing that. And, you know, with this being a mindset podcast, I really stress the importance of manifesting and how that gets you to where you want to be. And I'm sure you can think of, you know, since you worked with so many people, like, I bet you've had instances where things have come to fruition that you thought about back then. And then you're like, I'm doing an ad for Ritz Carlton. Like, these are things that you probably dreamed of and now you've seen them happen. So you understand the power of manifesting and seeing yourself doing something before it happens and actually just putting it into the universe, because we just did that. The universe will now take over.
Exactly. I remember one of my big goals was being able to go and model in Cape Town, South Africa. But again, at the time, I wasn't doing all of the mindset work. I wasn't believing in the power of God and everything that I needed to be doing. And I just thought, okay, that's just so far out there, because Cape Town, South Africa, for those that don't know, is actually a really big market for modeling. And there's a lot of diversity, for models. Where some areas they may prefer Caucasian models or Asian models, for instance. Cape Town is just a melting pot of clients who want all shades of models. And so it was just always a goal of mine. And ultimately that did happen. I did get to go to Cape Town. I was signed to an agency there. So I lived in South Africa for 3 months while I worked with this agency. And I specifically remember this one particular shoot where we had to be at work at around 4 in the morning because we had to get to the top of a mountain before the sunrise came up. And so I just remember standing on top of this mountain as the sun is rising, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm here. And the commercial actually has me on top of this mountain looking out when I end up seeing the final commercial. So that was amazing in terms of manifesting.
Yes. Oh my gosh. My mind is so blown right now because I never knew about Cape Town being so prominent in the modeling industry for that reason. And you got to live there, which must have been awesome just to be around a different culture, different way of being. And that is really, really cool. Well, I have to ask you this because this is something I've always thought about, because those of you listening, I actually met this beautiful woman when we were a part of like this beauty, skincare thing that was happening in Miami.
Right. Like a bloggers event.
A bloggers event. Yeah. And I walked in, I was like a little bit late and she was already in the room and I was like, whoa, like I was drawn to your confidence. I was drawn to your poise, the way you were asking questions about what they were showing us. And I was like, wow. So I want to ask you, like, this confidence in this aura you have, did you always have this, or is this something that took you time to build, and kind of where does it come from?
Yeah, I think confidence goes in different ways, and there's different ways that you can measure it, essentially, right? So for instance, when I was a child, I've always been an extrovert. Yeah, I was always that child that in school, I was the first one to raise my hand. Even in college, if my classmates wanted us to have an exam moved for a different date, everyone would be like, Kamla, ask the professor, like, figure something out. It was always Kamla, do something. And so I was never shy per se, but it's interesting because as much as I was outgoing and I was a people person, I wasn't necessarily popular by any means. I wasn't the girl at the time, woman now, girl at the time that the guys gravitated towards. I just was not that person. So I wasn't quote unquote considered popular.
Okay.
And so you would think sometimes that would have affected my confidence, but somehow I think ultimately I just like give that credit to God. It's just, the way that I was made, the way that, I thought about myself. And so I think that as obviously as I aged and then I went off to college and I didn't see as much of the judgmental behaviors in college, my confidence just grew even more. And then just from even becoming a model and realizing this industry has so much rejection, like you're forced to find positive things about yourself, find positive things about the people who are in your circle. And so I think there was a wave of it, right? As I grew and as I matured and as I realized that, hey, I am capable of accomplishing these things. So then naturally my confidence just grew. But I think ultimately I've just always been more outgoing and more willing to let my presence be known. But obviously in a professional, friendly way. I've never been the mean girl. Even though sometimes I remember specifically in college, one person years later told me the reason that she wasn't kind to me was because by looking at me, by my physical appearance, she expected me to be this different person. She expected for me to think that I was like God's gift to the world. And as she actually took time to get to know me, she realized, okay, her confidence is just her being genuine. Her confidence is, she really is that kind to people. It's not a front. It's not her thinking she's better than anybody else. So it's definitely a lot of interweaving parts to the confidence layer.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, what you said really spoke to me as well, because I mean, you are in an industry that has a ton of rejection and I barely scratched the surface of what it comes to being a model. And I just remember photographers being very rude, very mean, and having to deal with them, like putting you down for really no reason.
Right.
And just to deal with that on a day-to-day basis and kind of still maintain that aura and that confidence is really cool. But I want to ask you, a lot of our listeners are dealing with confidence issues or they are not feeling so confident. What advice or what tips would you give our listeners and viewers that they can do to help become more confident in their lives? Because that is one thing that really holds people back.
Right. So I think being confident, I think it's becoming progressively harder and harder. And I say that because of Instagram now, because of social media. Everything on what we see typically on social media is very curated. Everyone's lives looks perfect. Everyone has this life, quote unquote, that you aspire for, that you wish you could have. And so I think it's just really remembering that these platforms are there for marketing reasons. They're there for social reasons, not necessarily everyone's reality. So just keeping that in the back of your mind, almost to check yourself of saying, okay, I may not necessarily have what they have, but what they have may have been rented for the day, what they have may have been curated for the day. And so I think just putting that into perspective and finding little things in your own life that you can be appreciative of. I mean, I was listening to some affirmation piece one day and they were talking about, writing down the 5 things, for instance, that you're grateful for. And it could literally be something as simple as, I love the fact that my pillow is so soft when I go and lay down for bed, right? And I think the more and more that we find little things to be grateful for, we naturally start to be happier and then confidence builds from that, right? A lot of times our confidence suffers when there's things in our lives that we're not necessarily happy with. So start with that place, almost backtrack, figure out what are the things that make you happy and that you can realize you can be so grateful for. And then also, second piece is the people you're surrounded by. I mean, if you're surrounded by people who are constantly negative or people who are constantly talking about someone else's success as if that's a negative thing, those things are going to eventually, ultimately impact you and how you view the world, how you view yourself even. So just finding people in your tribe who can, if your love language is words of affirmation, people who can speak that into you so that you can start to see yourself maybe from a viewpoint of what other people see. Because sometimes we're our own worst critic, right? So sometimes we just need someone else to essentially help boost us if we are feeling a little bit low. So it's one, figuring that out for yourself, and then also having people around you. So when you are having those moments where you're struggling, someone else can feed that into you to build you back up for the confidence.
Oh my gosh. So good. You said so many things that I'm like, love that. Love that. Love that. You like grabbed in Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages. I'm like, yes. That book changed my life and my relationship. Everybody, book recommendation. If you haven't already done it, read The 5 Love Languages.
Right.
So you learn about yours and your partners and your everybody's. It's good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And what you think you already know about yourself, sometimes when you read it from a different perspective, you're like, oh, you find a different view that actually is going to help you more than you realize.
No, absolutely. But I'm really excited because now we get to talk about your book.
Yay!
Oh my gosh. You wrote a book. We have to hear all about it. Like, what caused you to make it? What made you want to put it out now?
Yeah.
How do we find it? I want to know all about it. Okay. I'm so excited.
Okay. So this book, I mentioned at the start of the podcast, where if you were intently listening at the start of this podcast, I mentioned that, people were asking me about all of this knowledge, right? And in my head, I thought, okay, maybe I could write a book. People had mentioned it, but I didn't think that I could write more than 20 pages. So I kept procrastinating it for about 2 years, literally. And I remember specifically, one day I was sitting on my bed and there was a guy was right next to me and he was like, start writing now. It was like crystal clear. So I literally got my computer in that moment and started writing. And I remember even when I was flying to Cape Town, South Africa for that modeling trip, I was on the plane and even when I got to South Africa, writing this book. And so part of it is, one, I want to help aspiring models. There's so much content in there about how to avoid scams, how to read contracts, or the different types of contracts, the do's and don'ts of developing your modeling portfolio, because your portfolio could make or break an agency potentially being interested in you, or a client being interested in you. And so I realized there was so much content that aspiring models were not understanding, or that they were investing all this time, energy, and sometimes even money into pursuing this career in the complete opposite sense of what is truly going to get them results. And so I eventually put the book out at this point because part of me being a perfectionist, I was procrastinating. I had this content, and first of all, let me just quickly say, so this book that I just put out, this ebook, is fully fleshed out in the sense of like starting your career, right? But ultimately, there's going to be a second edition book because this industry, people only see it for like the glamour and what they want out of it. But it's a business, and like any other business, there's a lot of content to learn. There's a lot that you have to digest and that you have to put into it, right? And so I was just being a perfectionist and thinking, oh, well, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this in the book. And then I specifically, so I released the book on July 29th. That was Wednesday. And that was a Wednesday. The Friday before that, I was speaking to my business manager and she gave me this speech. She's like, listen, we cannot do all of these other amazing things that you could have, that you could offer to people if you first don't put out your book. So she's like, we are putting out your book now. So between Friday night and Wednesday night, I finalized everything, updated my website, did everything that I needed to do from my standpoint, and put it out. So it was just making that decision, stop being a perfectionist. Progress is better than perfection, even though I think the book is pretty perfect for what it is, right? Because I spent so much time just redoing some things. But ultimately, I mean, I put so much effort and love into the book because I realized how much value it had and how it could really impact and change aspiring models' lives. So I know that was a lot, but it was the culmination of the process.
Oh my gosh. No, progress over perfection is probably the most important thing because it's about taking that massive action and getting it out there. And now people are in a state of standstill. Like, yes, I still see on Instagram, like people are shooting, they're doing things at home, but like this is a great time for people who've always thought about, maybe I should get into modeling, or I've always had this dream about modeling, to absorb, get what you've put out there and start doing the work, or call you to work with you so you can help them.
Exactly, because I do my one-on-one coaching. So for clients who want things specifically tailored to them, for instance, I work with various age groups. So whether it's a parent that's like, hey, I have this 10-year-old daughter that everyone stops me and says she should be a model, and they send me the photo. I'm like, wow, you're right. Like your daughter or son really should be a model. So I work with those people. And then I've worked with clients who are 45, 50 who say, listen, I've always wanted this dream. I just assumed that I was too old at this point to do it. And I'm like, no, you're not too old. Look at the commercials from Target, for instance, with the holiday campaigns. There's always a grandparent in that commercial. So don't let your age stop you. And even people with height, there are agencies now that are being more inclusive of height, and they're signing models that are 5 feet, 5 inches. And so it's just learning which agencies essentially work for you based on age, height, all of those things, and how to navigate that process, right? So it's like, okay, you can read the book, or if you'd like, you can do the one-on-one coaching with me just for more in-depth one-on-one time. And, you know, my coaching is not a course that you just log into the computer and doing it at your own pace. We're literally doing live video one-on-one based on your schedule to just make sure that you're successful, at least in trying.
Well, I would say get the book and do the coaching.
Yeah,
you got to be the most complete thing ever.
Exactly.
And I think that is so awesome that you put this out there and it's like ready for the world to see.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes people ask me, you know, they say like, if I read the book, do I need to do the coaching, for instance? Yeah. And I think about it this way. For instance, I don't know if anyone knows a Donald Miller. And so Donald Miller, I actually receive his emails every day, right? So he has books that you can buy, but he also has courses that you can buy, right? Because it's a difference in reading a book versus getting a full-fledged course, right? And it's like Michelle Obama, I bought her book, read her book, but yes, thousands of people still went to her book tour, right? Because it's different when you're having that one-on-one time with someone. And sometimes, at least in my case with coaching, getting to ask questions that are really personal to you.
No, definitely. I completely agree there. I have a question that I think a lot of our listeners may want to know is, what is like the biggest misconception about modeling? If you had to narrow it down, maybe to 2.
I think a lot of people assume that it's always glamorous. And here's an example. So a lot of people, they say to me, I want to be a model because I want to travel and I want to see myself in TV commercials and ads. And yes, all of that is great. All of that is amazing. I mean, I've had clients that literally, they will fly me to another state. They've flown me to the Bahamas. Like, you know, all of that is great. But there is work behind it, just like building another business. If you're an accountant and you have to sit at your desk, it's work, right? But you're doing it because you're passionate about it. Mm-hmm. So I think a misconception is that it's just all glamour and fun. So here's an example. I was doing a shoot for the Marriott Hotel, great client, and it happened to be a shoot in January. At the time that year, I think after they did the tracking for the whole year, it ended up being the coldest day of the entire year in Florida. So we were outside shooting for a hotel by the pool in a bathing suit in 30-degree weather with massive wind because they were on the ocean. Ooh. So in that sense, I have to smile. I have to pretend like I'm having the time of my life, but I am freezing. And so those are the times where people don't realize the behind the scenes aspect of it. But again, you know, I'm doing this because I love it, right? The other models are doing it because we love it. So at the end of the day, we get through that moment and we're like, okay, that was the greatest client. The other models were super sweet. And we're getting paid to be on a lounge chair. So pros and cons. And then also biggest misconception number 2, so I'll give you 2, is that models don't eat. That one blows my mind and really irritates me. So there's a shirt, I don't know if you've seen it, but it says, don't feed the models. And it was come up with like as a joke, right? Because models, granted, let me back up for a second. The fashion industry is known. There are a lot of models, especially models that do runway shows, that they don't eat adequately because of the pressure that designers put on them to be a certain body weight and everything. I'm an advocate for models being healthy and not being too thin or binging to be more curvy so they can be a plus size model, right? I'm all about the healthy aspect. But just this notion that models don't eat is a fallacy, because I'm naturally a size 0, but when I tell you, my fiance is always like, do you want to get something to eat? And I'll say, no, I'm not hungry right now. He's like, no, let's get you something to eat, because I know in an hour you're going to say you're hungry and that we should have stopped to get something to eat, because I eat all the time. It just so happens that my body genetically is a size 0. So that one is one that kind of irritates me because it's not true for a lot of models.
Wow, that is so true. And I didn't even know about models binge eating to try to be more curvy. I didn't hear about that one.
Right, because, okay, so for some models, there's an in-between size where you're not thin enough per se to not be a plus size, but maybe you're a size 10, for instance. And the ideal sample size for curvy models is more like 14 plus. So then models who they're like in between, they're like, well, it's not really healthy per se for me to be a size 2 when I'm a size 10, but maybe it's more attainable for me to be a size 14.
Wow.
And they're just trying to fit in and get more clients, like Elaine Bryant, for instance, or whoever the clients are that they would want to work with for plus size brands. And so it's not necessarily that those brands are demanding that, it's just that they realize that's what the brands are booking. And so they just start eating almost unhealthily. Is unhealthily a word? It just sounded awkward when it came out. When they start eating foods that are not proper nutrition to gain weight, just like there's models who don't eat adequate nutrition to lose weight. But generally speaking, I would say, the majority of the models that I've ever worked with are all healthy, who have proper meals and proper diets.
No, that's really good, because that is a big misconception. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. But I know that everybody wants to know, what is the process like to work with you? What does it look like? And then talk to us about how we go about doing that.
Gotcha. Okay, so 2 things. So we'll go the quickest route right now is my ebook. That's on my website. So if you just go to my website, Kamla-Kay.com, and I know my name is unique, so it's spelled Kamlakay, so Kamla-Kay.com, and then / modeling ebook. But if you forget the / just go to my website, Kamla-Kay.com, and there's a tab that says ebook. You can just directly go to my website and download that onto my website. The minute you pay for the ebook, it's in your inbox. If you want more of like the one-on-one coaching with me, again, you can just go to my website. There's an entire page that literally lays out all of the frequently asked questions, pretty much the whole bullets of what you can expect in the course. And then obviously, like I said, the one-on-one time with me is very tailored to your needs, aspirations based on your age and height. And so that can also be directly booked on my website. But certainly, if you have any questions prior to buying a product or booking, you can just simply send me an email and I'll be happy to get back with you. But I think, booking that course and that ebook, if you really have this goal, I think people have this misconception with the modeling industry that you should never pay, but you should never pay to join an agency, right? But just like anything else, if you want to be an accountant, if you wanted to be an attorney, you go to school for that. If you want to be a carpenter, you go to trade school for that. You have to put in the work and the steps and the education and the training behind whatever career it is that you want. Modeling is no different.
No, absolutely. Well, we are excited and we want to work with you. I know the listeners are so excited about this book that you have. Is there any last words you'd like to leave our listeners before we close out the session?
Let's see. I think the main thing is, there are a few, I guess. I really learned with putting out this ebook, the progress, not perfection, which I mentioned before, because I feel like a lot of people hold themselves back because they feel like they're not good enough for whatever it is, your career. But let's, speaking of modeling, they feel like they're not good enough because of their age, or because they feel like they're too short, or they're not sure if they're pretty enough, because the fashion industry has a standard, quote unquote, of what it is to be beautiful, right? But we also see that's changing, where there's so many people with very unique looks. They're now getting signed to modeling agencies. People that maybe before wouldn't have gotten signed are now getting contracts. And so I think it's just a matter of finding out what it is that you're super passionate about and not being afraid to pursue it, because the worst that can happen is it doesn't work out. And then you're like, okay, it didn't work out. But you don't want to be 90 years old thinking, oh, I should have tried, right? So Absolutely. I think realizing, put the steps forward, even if it's not perfect, see what happens. And then the aspect that I mentioned before in terms of comparison. With models, you're always seeing someone else that you feel is prettier than you, or is that more established than you, or someone else. I see models that are already in Sephora commercials and campaigns. But realizing that instead of looking at them like as a negative competition, realizing, okay, if those people are already there, that means there's potential for me to be there also, right? So using competition, not so much as a competition, but as a motivation.
No, thank you for those wise words. Kamla-Kay, thank you so much for being on the show, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Thank you. I'll get the ebook, Kamla-Kay.com, or you can just schedule a one-on-one time with me.
Yes, everybody do that. Until the next time, this is Danielle Mills. I'm your host, and we're signing off. Bye, everyone.
Bye.